What up, what up, what up? Back again for another great episode of the FTN Fantasy Show. What's the word? It's your boy LQ, Mr. Real Deal Fantasy HQ. You see the face, you know the case, and we are back again for another great episode of What's the Word? And I am joined here today by Houston insider, boots on the ground, and Houston fanalist, Garrett Williams. What is going on, brother?
Laquan, not much, man. I appreciate you having me on. You know, I will say I'm not technically an insider, like you said, a fanalist. You know, I'm someone who, you know, born and raised in Houston. Started a page a couple of years ago. Have experience playing football at the collegiate level, playing receiver, and you know, it just kind of turned into a passion. And you know, I'm doing good. I follow the team closely, and you know, I'm doing great.
Absolutely, man. Look, I like to label you guys as kind of like the insiders because you guys follow the team so closely. And me, I'm just a fantasy analyst. I got eyes on all 32, but I don't follow as closely as you guys. So that's why I call you guys boots on the ground, because honestly, man, there's a lot going on in Houston right now. And I want to get right to the chase. I mean, what is the temperature check on this Texans offense, man? Like, how is everybody feeling about this going into the season?
So it depends on who you ask. Obviously, like I tend to be a more optimistic fan, which in Houston, you know, you can call me crazy for that given our past experiences. But, you know, obviously the O-line's a big concern from last year, but I've been very bullish on their ability to rework that O-line. And I feel like the rest of the public, you know, particularly in the Houston fan base, is starting to join me in that projection. You know, they've looked good in the couple preseason games that they've had, but you know, for me, it was everything last year was all coaching and scheme. And what we fired Bobby Slowick and we hired Nick Caley, and then we fired our O-line coach and Chris Strauser and promoted Cole Popovich, who is, you know, highly regarded in the NFL world. So, and we also changed personnel too. So like for me, you know, I get the concerns about the Texans O-line this year, but I feel a lot of people are mistakenly assuming that we're running it back with the same unit. Again, I mentioned coaching and schemes change, personnel has changed. There's only going to be one player that's going to start on the offensive line that was on the offensive line last year, and Titus Howard, and he may not even play the same position. So to me, it's not fair to say, okay, they were bottom third last year, they're going to be bottom third again. Like, you know, to me, they can most definitely reach average status at O-line and potentially push towards a top 12 unit, and that's all they need to be a great team this year, in my opinion.
I like to hear that because I got to be honest, I was one of those guys. I'm thinking it's the same old line. You guys got rid of and traded Laramie Tunsil, which I think was your best graded offensive lineman last season. But hearing you speak about this, there's a lot other concern outside of that offensive line. I mean, we got to talk Joe Mixon, man. Some folks got drafts coming up this weekend. Some folks in the fantasy streets are scared to death to touch him in drafts. Now, his ADP has dropped very, very late in draft, but some folks are staying clear away. I mean, has there been any new news, any update on Joe Mixon and this foot injury?
So I kind of have a opinion that's not in the mainstream. Like I was opposite on O-line. I was bullish, and I'm the same way with Joe Mixon's injury. I actually just wrote an article earlier today about this, believe it or not, which I can share with you. But you know, I tend
where
to think.
Where can folks get that? I mean, where can folks find that?
I have my website, HoustonStressans.com, which is nice. Houston Stressans is STRESSANS.com. But my whole take on that thing is, you know, D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio, they're almost like the New England Patriots when it comes to injuries. They're very tight-lipped and don't tell you anything. And so as a result, when there's no information, people speculate and start to kind of, you know, guess to what's happening. But my take is, like, I still think he can play week one. I definitely think he'll avoid IR. So basically the whole story with him was, you know, I kind of have a theory too, which may be wrong as to what happened, but he's on the NFI, the non-football injury list. That means his injury happened not with the team or in football activities. But last year he had two instances where he got hip drop tackled twice and hurt the same ankle twice and did not, the penalty, the new rule was not called either time that hurt him on that play.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's dealing with. And my suspicion, you know, the NFI was he re-aggravated that same injury outside of the building. I think he might have got some minor procedural stuff done, but that's kind of a crazy out there thing. But, you know, the overall thing for me is I think he's fine. If you look at him, he has not played in the preseason since 2021. Last year, he was newly traded to the Texans. He was in a new offense and needed to get reps. He didn't practice until the last week of training camp last year. And so that was a big thing last year with the quadricep injury. So to me, he is a proven veteran running back who doesn't need to be out there, whether it's a new scheme or not. He can run in any scheme. D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio, from me following the team closely for a long time, they have shown that they are very, very cautious on returning players from injury, like Nico Collins from hamstring injuries. Last year, they probably could have brought him back 2 games early. The year before, he had a calf or Achilles. They could have probably brought him back 2 weeks early. And they have openly said, we will give guys an extra 2 to 3 weeks to return. And so that's merely what I saw here. We saw it in the spring with Stroud's shoulder. I was all over that. Everyone was freaking out, thinking he had surgery. He tore his pec, this and that. I said, no. They're like, well, it's a new scheme. He needs to be thrown. Like, no, like he's fine. It's a pitch count. They had the long vision in mind. And to me, it's the same thing with Mixon. But again, the fact that there's no information causes a lot of speculation. I know in the fantasy world, there's fantasy doctors. A lot of them do a great job, but they're speculating. They saw he went to a podiatrist that does shockwave therapy, but they assume that means the worst case thing. But to me, that's just minor maintenance. Shockwave therapy can also be done just to get rid of tendonitis or break up scar tissue. So to me, he's just getting ready for the season. So I'm kind of in a hot take on that. I battle with my own fans. I know it's easy to think pessimistically, but I think he's fine based off of, the track record of Nick and D'Amico, all those examples I laid out. So, and I will say too, like Aaron Wilson's the local beat reporter who's reported this. He was spotted in the airport wearing a walking boot earlier in the spring. And then he said, it's always been positive, on track to try and play week 1. And this all took a turn when Ian Rappaport reported earlier in August or late July, once he was put on the NFI and not in training camp, which he didn't, participate in OTAs either. And that's when things kind of ran rampant, and it really was the same information. And D'Amico Ryans the next day had a presser, and he was, livid. He was like, he called out Ian Rappaport, in my opinion. He said, these reporters don't care about our players. He said, it's no new information. Nick Caserio was just on 610 this morning with a couple local guys. He said nothing's changed. And so it's like people want new news, but because they're tight-lit, people start speculating. And then I also base my opinion based off of this, like, me being in the weeds. He was, rehabbing in a facility in early June. Obviously, he wasn't running sprints or anything, but he was working out. And then he was at his camp, just a few days prior to that in early June, walking around, no brace. So, like, I'm looking at, like, what I see and matching all that up. To me, it's fine. It's just, again, when you don't hear anything, people start getting nervous.
Yeah, man, the fantasy streets can go wild, man. We got to know because these folks have drafts coming up. But Garrett, what I'm hearing is kind of like buy the dip on Joe Mixon. Like, I don't think there has been anything in stone solid for his ADP to drop this far. It's all speculation at this point. So for him to be dropping this far, I might advise a couple folks out there, if he's dropping to be your RB4, your RB5,
for sure.
When you get in that cheap range, why not, man? This is Joe freaking Mixon. Trust me.
Well, worst case, he's on, which I don't see. He's on IR, misses 4 games. Okay, it's a long season, and then some people may
playing for week 1. That's
not
what we do here.
People speculate, oh, we signed Nick Chubb because he's hurt, and we drafted Woody Mixon because he's hurt. No, we signed Nick Chubb to replace Dameon Pierce, in my opinion, which, they traded John Mechie. They've showed that, like, guys in that last year who weren't extended, he's in the last year of his rookie contract. We're not waiting on anybody. The Texans are in a win now mode. So to me, those 2 moves didn't indicate them knowing about Mixon's health. So yeah. And then, I was going to say this as well, but like the way this offense wants to be ran through Nick Caley, they talk about a physical offense. They want to run the ball first. And we've seen that. Yeah. We saw it in the first couple of games when the offense looked great, is the run game was unstoppable in both of them. And it set up the deep play action passing. So he will get his carries. Chubb will be RB2, and in my opinion, Woody Marks will be the third down back.
Awesome, man. I want to talk about John Mechie. Now, he just got shipped to Philly, and you guys got some tight end help with Harrison Bryant. I want to talk about the wide receivers that are left in the room outside of Nico Collins. What do you feel like your expectations from your lens, from these young guys that are in there, like the Jaden Higgins, the Jalen Noels? Like, I do feel like there is a sense like they feel good with the guys that they have right now.
Yeah, and so as I mentioned too, like, we will have explosives, but it's going to be opened up through the play action pass.
Mhm.
But, obviously Nico is Nico. To me, he's a top 5 receiver in the league. And I think that, they
Facts.
talked about, yeah, I would say even top 3, just depends on health. But,
Whoa there. Whoa there, Garrett. Whoa there.
hey, I've seen what I've seen, man. He just got to stay on
Yeah.
the field. But they've talked about it being a playmaker's offense and getting the ball in the playmaker's hands. So I'm excited to see how he utilizes Nico. But to me, the wide receiver 2 in terms of production is Christian Kirk. He's going to be
Okay.
the starting slot receiver. They brought him in as a veteran. This offense, it's going to be a mix of the Rams, the Patriots, and then also their own
Ooh.
spin on it. So, but the Patriots element is the whole CJ Stroud having more command of the offense. Thank goodness he was not allowed to do any checks, ID in the mic, change the play,
Wow.
audible with Bobby Slowick in that Shanahan scheme. So now he's more of like this Brady type and the Josh McDaniels type. And they've talked about it, Nick Caserio, Nick Caley, D'Amico Ryan, CJ Stroud. They've all talked about this more control, more command. And with that also is more control and command for the slot receiver, which is called the adjuster in this offense, meaning they have the freedom and flexibility to adjust their route based off of the defender's leverage and coverage. But the big part of that is the quarterback and the receiver have to see it the same way. So back to Christian Kirk, he's a veteran who's played in this type of offense, who knows alignment and, leverage and when to do what. And so him and CJ Stroud already have this undeniable connection with a lot of quick
Ooh.
games. So he will be a heavily targeted guy. To me, he's a security blanket. He's a true slot receiver. Stephon Diggs was great last year, but he converted from outside to inside, so he wasn't a true slot receiver. Kirk has pretty good speed for a slot receiver too. So to me, he'll be heavily targeted. Like, for CJ Stroud, he can just target him on pretty much any play and allow him to get open because he'll know the right way to win. So after that, when you talk about Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, I'll stop first and say Xavier Hutchinson has been getting a majority of the reps at the Z position
Ooh.
opposite of Nico Collins. So could that change? Yes. But they've shown, and when you listen and hear these guys, Nick Caley, D'Amico Ryans, they prefer consistency and reliability over upside and potential. And that doesn't mean that Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, won't towards the back end of the year start getting more reps. But, Higgins may have more upside, but if Hutch has been in the system, even though it's different, there's some carryover. They're familiar with him. He's improved, doing all the little things right. He's had a great camp. He's had a really good camp, including the preseason games. He's reliable. He's making catches. So that would kind of worry me to draft Higgins or expect any production early on. And it kind of goes the same with Noel. Noel is electric, man. I mean, he's got a lot of juice, a lot of wiggle, but again, I mean, if he's fighting behind Kirk, obviously there's the argument for Kirk that he could, get injured given his prior history. But, given, like I mentioned, the veteran experience from Kirk, knowing how to read defenses, stuff like that, that could, keep Noel behind him a little more than you'd expect. So it would be tough for me to try and start a Jaden Higgins or a Jalen Noel. I mean, Christian Kirk, Nico Collins, all for it. It would be tough right now.
Hey, Fantasy Streets, you hear that, man? These are two rookies that have been buzzing a lot this whole entire summer. Like, we are forgetting about Christian Kirk, the things that he's done in Jacksonville. We are forgetting that, there has to be a Z in this formation, because I do feel like Jaden Higgins is a copy of Nico Collins. Same size. The guys are speedsters. These guys can really fly down the perimeter. Jalen Noel, he has to compete for that slot area with Christian Kirk. And Kirk has been a veteran and consistent in that slot. So I think a lot of fantasy folks need to tap in, Garrett, because there's been some real reaches of Jaden Higgins going in drafts. And I am a huge Jaden Higgins fan.
Me too.
I'm not going to admit that I'm one of them. But at the end of the day, folks who have drafts this weekend, keep this in mind. Christian Kirk is not being talked about. He's not being talked about in your league rooms. He's not being talked about in the fantasy streets on the timelines of the internet. So he could be
PPR. He's going to be a beast, bro. I mean,
Oh,
he's
yes.
going to be the chain mover, third and short. He's looking to him every time. He's going to move the chains. And this offense, too, the thing that killed the Texans the last 2 years under Slowick was negative plays from the wide zone or sacks or, maybe Stroud getting greedy and not taking the short, simple stuff. So there's a concerted effort with Nick Caley where you take positive yards, whether it's 3, 4, 5 yards, you take the quick, easy, cheap yards, tight ends, you hit them, this and that. So, you'll see a lot of underneath stuff, but if you're PPR, that would lean towards Kirk. But, and also too, as far as like you just saying, like, Higgins, like I'm high on him. He's a freak, 4.4, Nico Collins clone. I was surprised we drafted him, like you said, because he's an X. He's just like Nico. but they have
Yeah.
him playing Z, but he's just behind Xavier Hutchinson right now. And from my experience covering the team, they tell you how it is. Like what you see is what you get. Like they're not going to like put Hutchinson out there and then all of a sudden just switch Jaden Higgins out. Like they believe he can play, and they don't,
Awesome.
they don't discriminate, based off of where you're drafted or how you're paid. They play in their eyes the best players. So
Could I ask you about Hutchinson? Is he kind of like a plug and play, being that Tank Dell is missing in action right now with injury? Like, can folks really form that picture in their head when they're looking at Hutchinson?
as far as fantasy is tough, and this offense is different. So like we had talked about X and Z, it's almost like two X's. They want to be a physical offense. So they like these big body receivers on the outside. So technically it's two X's, but it's a Z. And so you're not going to see a lot of those more dynamic routes that you would have saw from Tank Dell. It's more of like, the deep in cuts and possession catches and deep out, stuff like that. And they also want them to be able to block in the run game. But, something that I suspect we will see that we saw a lot with McVay, and we saw it a little bit in this last preseason game, is that insert motion where you can have the outside receiver insert motion into the box and run a route up through the C gap. And so you kind of get creative that way. So, yeah, I don't think he'll be a Tank Dell per se. I honestly I haven't really thought too much about Texans fantasy wise. I've been locked in on just the team, but I mean, I'm realizing right now, I personally would do Nico, Kirk, and I would be kind of weary of the rest, because those could change
Wow.
unless you get one late and stash them. If an injury happens, to Hutchinson, or if an injury happens to Kirk, yeah, boom now. But I wouldn't reach and draft them expecting immediate production.
Wow, Gary, you might have helped a lot of fantasy folks out there that have drafts coming up this week to pivot from those options that are looking like great values down there. Jaden Higgins looks like a great value down there, but Christian Kirk might have something to say about that, who is going later in drafts. Garrett, this has been awesome, man. I mean, where can folks find your articles, all your content, man? Please give them a shout out to the fantasy streets.
Yeah, appreciate it. So I'm at Texans Commenter on pretty much all social media, or it's at Houston Stressans. That's STRESSANS.
I like that name, man.
Yeah, and so I made that name when I made my Twitter account just as a fan, and, because a lot of the games are down the wire and they're stressful. So
Yeah,
I do
man.
like a moniker, blessing or stressing, like I love it or hate it. And so right now I'm blessing, but yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. I got a website, houstonstresses.com. Write articles, got video, got merch. I got my Stingley shirt on right now. Float like a
Awesome.
butterfly, sting like a bee. So
Ooh.
yes, sir. But
Oh,
yeah, I'm all
Mama
over the
Lily.
place, man. I got you on
Awesome,
Texans
man.
content.
Listen, man, if I go down to Houston, because I've been before, I'm looking for the good food, man. Where am I going?
Man, I mean, they got something for everybody, so I can't just name one place. I mean, Houston
Your
is a
favorite
melt.
spot, man. When I touch down, I gotta hit one of your favorite spots. Like, where are we going, man?
I will say I am kind of boring and lame. I'm a father of 2 young girls, so I don't get out much. But for me personally, I'm a big seafood guy, and
Okay.
Houston, we're right next to the Gulf in Galveston. I think we have some of the best seafood in the world, honestly. And so, just one spot
Whoa.
that comes to mind is Good Company Seafood. But I mean, any seafood spot, if you get some redfish or red snapper, you can't go wrong with that. To me, it's fresh, it's delicious.
That's the first time I've heard Houston for the land of the seafood, man. I gotta check you out with that, man. If I make it down there anytime soon, I'll definitely ring your phone, man. I definitely want to try some
Yeah.
seafood down there. That's
Or
different.
if you do, like if you want really good seafood, go down to Galveston down 45. And they got all the restaurants where the fish is coming in daily fresh. To me, it's the best seafood in the world. I'm kind of biased, but I love it, man.
That's awesome, Gary, man. I appreciate you coming by for What's the Word FTN Fantasy. Please make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll be back again next week with more boots on the ground helping you guys out for your drafts that are coming up.